Hi, this is Jim Colton, and this is the Driven Golf Podcast. In this episode, we first chat with Ryan French, a.k.a. Monday Q Info. Ryan's passion for golf and following those chasing their dreams has led him to be the trusted source for the compelling stories of heartbreak and breakthroughs that occur nearly every week on the fringes of professional golf. I hope you'll see the parallels between Ryan's story and the professional golfers that he covers. In Angle of Attack, Andrew and I finish up our three-part series on tournament prep for elite junior golfers. In this episode, we discuss best practices the day of and during an event. This episode is brought to you by FlagBag Golf Company. FlagBag makes custom golf bags and accessories using repurposed old golf flags. It's the perfect gift for that passionate golfer in your life. Go to flagbaggolfco.com for more information and mention Driven Golf to receive a free custom head cover with the purchase of one of their custom golf bags. With that, here's episode 9 with Ryan French. Well, Ryan French, welcome to the Driven Golf Podcast. How's it going?
Good, man. Thank you. Thank you guys for having me on.
Man, I'm absolutely thrilled. Huge fan of you and your work, and just more importantly, I think how you go about your business. I think you're just an awesome follow and a straight shooter, and I'm just really excited to see everything you got going on. And I hope for the golf podcast listeners that get a ton out of this, both from your experiences and highlighting the stories of players up and coming and trying to break through, and just sort of the life lessons of you like chasing your dream and turning this into a real thing.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a wild, crazy ride. I'm sure we'll get into it, but I say this all the time is I can relate more to players now that are out there chasing their dream as I'm trying to figure out how to make this a business, and money's not coming in as fast as it needs to and all those things. So it's great though. I mean, and there's just a lot of value to doing what you love. I get to wake up every day and, my marriage is better. My kids are happier. I'm around my kids a lot more. There's just a ton of value in doing what you love. That's all there is to it.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So I imagine at the very root of all of this is just a deeply rooted love of the game. So can you take us back to the beginning, sort of like we have this thing called origin story, which is sort of like your introduction to the game. And then it really just like, how did you get the bug? Like, how did you realize like golf is like the thing for me?
Yeah. I mean, it really goes back to my dad. My dad was a good golfer, solid single digit player. And our backyard was the third hole on a little municipal course called Alpena Golf Club. And golf just isn't complicated in Alpena. And so no one, this is a very casual jeans type t-shirt type golf course. And my dad was the CEO of a very small company. We're a middle-class family. And he would come home. I mean, he just made it his job to leave work at 5:00 as many days as he could. We'd jump on the fourth hole, play back to the first hole, and then finish on the hole that was in front of our house. And then, have dinner at 7:00. And so I started when I was 6, and, my dad and I played thousands and thousands of rounds of golf together. And then fast forward, I played community college golf, tried to walk on at Michigan State, realized that was kind of, I always say, is like my wake up call that there was a lot better golfers. I grew up in a small town, was kind of a big fish in a small town, won the club championship as a teenager, those kind of things. I thought it was like hot stuff. Went to junior college, played well there. Then I was like, oh, of course I'm going to just play at Michigan State. This is the national, the progression. And I got to Michigan State. I remember the tryouts, and I played decent, and I shot I don't remember exactly, but 75, 76. And it wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible.
Yeah.
And I got in and I was 13th, and everybody was ahead of me. It was like, man, I played terrible. And I'm like, oh, I got no chance. And so, again, back to my dad, kind of how we got into this side of pro golf is my dad and I used to take a trip a year, and caddy on a mini tour. And so instead of playing somewhere, we caddied on a mini tour, and it kind of was the introduction into the life that I now cover every day.
That that has to be the most unique origin story that I've ever heard. Like,
Yes.
like, do you remember like the first time your dad like mentioned that to you? Like, does that seem like your dad, that like a perfectly natural thing for your dad to bring up, or based on his interest and his experience?
Yeah, so I was always a golf nerd, so this is a true origin story. I don't want to get too deep. I don't know how much time we have, but we didn't have a TV. So we were watching the Stanley Cup Finals when I was, I think, 8 years old, and our TV started on fire. Uh, and so um, my parents, they were not against TV or anything like that, but it was like, oh, we'll go a week and see what happens, and we'll go a month and see what happens. My parents didn't have a TV for 30 years, and
Wow.
so and since I grew up on the golf course, so my true golf nerdery came from I read the newspaper even as a kid, and you just can learn so much more pre-internet, obviously. Like, I used to look at full field scores. I used to get Golf Week magazine where they had all the mini tour
Yeah, yeah,
scores and
yeah.
all those things. So I was always a golf nerd. So it was kind of my idea. The Canadian tour before it was associated with the PGA tour, uh, had events. We live in Michigan, so it's like a 4 or 5 hour drive. I looked it up and was like, "Hey, Dad, let's go try it." And the caddy master was so excited because we just knew what we were doing. And a lot of these caddies on mini tours, have no idea. They're old people or they're young kids, and they were so excited. And the like real moment of like what life looks like for minor league golfers. So our tradition was we would camp when we were at this campsite, and I'm in the public restroom, and next to me, like, I knew enough about golf to know, like, this guy's a golfer. And I was like, "Are you," like, he was in there in the morning, we were getting ready to go caddy, and I was like, "Are you, a golfer?" And he's like, "Yeah." And I was like, it just blew my mind. Like, I just had what a lot of people think is, like, pro golfers are wealthy and they have all sorts of money, and I've never really like, I put the off course stuff, I knew enough, I played enough in my life to know that there was a plenty of good golfers, but I never put the financial side together, and it was my moment like, "Whoa, this life is really different." And this guy, I wish I would give anything to remember his name, but, like, he pulled his, camper around site to site at the Canadian tour and saved money that way. And so it was kind of my introduction to like, whoa, there's a life out here that I've not no idea exists. And I was lucky enough to like get to know guys. Would go back and caddy. I caddied for a Canadian named Brian Yep who made it to the Corn Ferry Tour, but he'd invite me, like, he wouldn't have a caddy for first stage of Q school, so he'd invite me. He won on the Canadian tour with me on the bag. I had nothing. I mean, like, no kit. I knew enough about golf to stay out of the way, but it wasn't like I was reading wind or anything like that. But just very, very cool experiences. I tell people all the time, like, if there's any way you can ever caddy on a mini tour, or for guys that are at this level or girls, it's a great way. Like, people have no idea how these guys are. And it was a great way for me to learn both on the course and off the course.
Yeah, I think seeing that up close. And I think one of the things when you're following these leaderboards, and I actually remember growing up in like the golf week and the golf worlds.
Mhm.
Like, I remember seeing, I don't know if it was Eldrick Woods at the time or they called him Tiger
Yep.
Woods back in like the junior rankings. And this guy from California was just number one by miles, and just wondering who this kid was. But yeah, as you're following these leaderboards and actually like experiencing some of these tournaments, you really start to connect the dots. Like, I'm starting to see that with my son and his tournaments. And then, some of these guys he's competed against, Corn Ferry players or guys who are now in
Yep.
college, is like you kind of scan for guys that like my son had played with or we had interacted with, and you kind of root for him, right? You're like, hey, I want to see this guy do well, or oh, this guy shot 79 and wonder what happened. Like, yeah, and I guess that a lot of that really hasn't changed for you.
Yeah, and I mean, that really is what my account is now, just a much deeper level than what I did. Like, as I got to know these guys, it would be guys we were paired with, or guys we came across, and I would go, "Oh, where are you playing next?" And they'd say, "So and so tour." So I'd go find so and so tour and look at the scores, and then I'd start to look and go, "Oh, yeah, we played with that guy 2 years ago on the Dakotas tour," or look at a Monday qualifier, and then that just kind of built on itself, and that hasn't changed. Now, obviously, it's my full-time job now, but like I tweeted it out today is like I still obviously there's a business aspect and sponsors and all that, but at the core of what I do, I just tweet and write do podcasts about what I find interesting because A, it's fun for me, and B, it's worked for me. So
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, I think being true to yourself, I think that resonates, with guys like myself for sure, and your audience. Yeah, it's awesome to see, and it shines through, like I said at the outset. So when did this become sort of kind of tracking it on your own to actually becoming first a Twitter thing? Why
Yeah.
don't we start there?
Yeah, so fast forward many years, I was married, and our son Jackson, who's now 8, had brain surgery. He has Chiari malformation, which ironically Bobby Jones had uh, towards the end of his life. And my wife was a nurse. I was running a group of restaurants, um, and I left my job temporarily, what I thought was temporarily, to help get Jack back to health. So I literally was like, I'm going to take 6 weeks off, took an FMLA leave. There was zero intention, but I started a Twitter account. Like, I cannot say, guys, there was zero chance that this would ever be a thing. I never thought it would be a thing. It was very selfish. It was like maybe players, friends, family, but I never thought this could be a thing in a million years ever. I was just like, I'm going to start a Twitter account and I'll start. The original idea was just to, for those listening that don't know, Monday qualifiers are hosted by PGA sections, different ones each week. So
They're hard to find.
leaderboards are hard to find. So my original idea was like just one place where people can find the Monday qualifier. And then I just started telling stories of like either their career or if it's a guy I knew or had some connection to, a little personal side story, and it just grew. And so, I mean, there's a million things to skip over, but I've never gone back to work, which is insane. 7 years.
And your son's doing well?
Yeah, and our son's doing well. So it's been the wildest of rides.
I've heard this story before, but maybe you can expound on it for the audience. Their Twitter handle is Case of the Golf One, which isn't. I always just search for Monday Q, but how did that come? How did that come about?
Yeah. So I mean, I always point to this story as I telling you. People are like, "Did you have any?" None, zero. So the idea was a case of the Mondays, and to tell people how little I knew about social media, I didn't know there was a character limit on your handle. So I don't have any personal. I had a Twitter account, but that's it. I've never had Facebook or now I have Instagram, but like I never had a personal account. So I typed in a case of the Monday and it like cut you off at a case of, I got to like MOD or something. And I was like, oh, well, that's not going to work. And then I tried like a couple other things and it wasn't available. And then Twitter suggested a case of the Golf One. And I was just like, oh, no one's going to care. I never even thought that far ahead. I never thought no one's going to care. I just assumed no one was going to care. So yeah, this is fine. 100 people are going to, like, they all know who I am personally. So they won't care what my handle is. And I clicked
Yeah.
it. And yeah, I just got to ask that question the other day. I was like, why haven't you changed? And I'm just like, it's part of the story now.
Yeah, it's part of who you are. Now you
Yeah.
can't change it. Something they ask you, it's like early days Monday Q info. Is there a moment where this thing you started to notice that it was gaining momentum and gaining steam to like a surprising level? I don't know if it's maybe just the people that were reaching out to you and maybe some crazy story or tweet that got a lot of traction.
Yeah, the moment, and I talk to them a lot now because they're still in this position. The South Florida PGA section runs a ton of Monday qualifiers early in the year, and so like in fact the Corn Ferry one's happening now. But the Honda Monday, for those listening, used to be the Super Bowl of Mondays. It's gotten screwed over because of the changes, and it's not the Honda anymore. Whatever it is, but the Honda Monday in 2018 used to be so big that it leaked over to Tuesday. So Tuesday morning, Brett Graff is his name. He's the tournament director of the South Florida PGA. Was sending me shot by shot updates. Like I remember Sang Moon Bae was in it, and Paul Pastor, and like it was a playoff, like 7 or 8 players, I don't remember. And he was sending me pictures and like literally shot by shot updates. And all I was doing is like looking at my phone and tweeting them out, right? Like, and my kids had to go to school. And I mean, the momentum just like, I don't remember. I'm sure it's minuscule the amount of people that were interacting at that point compared to now, but it felt like a million people, and people were like genuinely interested. And literally, I tweeted out, "Should I make my kids late to school? uh, I have to take my kids to school. Should I keep giving you guys updates and make them late, or should I take them to school?" And I don't remember. It felt like a million people responded like, you gotta stay, you gotta stay to like." And I was like, whoa, like just so blown away, right? Like that people care. Like Sang Moon Bay to me, yeah, I know. Like I'm a golf nerd, but to like a casual golf fan, they would no idea who he was, and so I mean, that was a very, like, big, and literally, I took my kids to school, like, a half an hour late. The I just kept updating people, and the kids missed school, and my wife is the most understanding woman ever. She's, like, supported us financially for 3 years while I've tried to figure this out, and, like, she didn't care. We laughed about it, and that was definitely, like, wow, people actually care. And then I say this all the time, is the PGA Tour followed me when I had around 10,000 followers, and that was really, like, I remember just calling people and being like, "What?" Like, they follow, I think they don't follow me now anymore, which is,
Really?
not yeah, it's I mean, I'm a little critical of the tour at this point, but, um, I just remember calling people, like, "Holy cow, the PGA Tour," like, it just was so mind-blowing that they cared about what I was tweeting. It just was so crazy to me. And
I
then
seem
I got a job with the PGA Tour.
Yeah, that's crazy. I seem to recall like early days. I don't even know how long this goes back, but maybe some run-ins with the tour in terms of like content you were posting or pictures you were posting, and then forcing you to
Yeah.
take it down. And yeah, maybe we go into that because I have some commentary on that, but I just wanted to get the backstory there.
Yeah, I mean, so I knew nothing about, I mean, I say this, I can't stress how little I knew about journalism or media rights. It's just never media rights was not a word I'd even like. I knew it, but what did it mean? I had no idea. So for 3 years, so I worked for the PJ Tour, and then I eventually went to Fire Pit. But like I didn't know what media rights went meant. But every once in a while, people would send me videos from Mondays. The section started to know me, and they would send me videos or pictures or give me updates. I would be at ones that I could drive to, like the Rocket Mortgage is close, like a couple hours away from my house. I would go there and just do live updates. But again, media rights was not a word I didn't even know. And so, uh, you know, I I helped make Mondays a thing. All the people that follow along, it's crazy that I say those words out loud, but um, so I started with Fire. The PGA Tour offered me a full time job for a a laughable amount of money, like minimal amount of money, and I said no, and the I just like was like no, and the day after that they said I couldn't take pictures or shoot videos at Mondays anymore, and I was like, what? And they're like, well, we own the media rights, which they do 100%. There's no argument about that. It's just that they never said
Yeah, yeah.
anything, a single word for 3 years or 4 years that I was doing this stuff, and then they took over. Side note, I showed them what I did. They took over doing Mondays, and then they were like, "You can't take videos and shoot pictures." And I was like, "What?" So that was kind of my introduction into media rights. So I was like, "Okay." I was like, it was crazy.
This is where I get a little bent out of shape because like you were highlighting these stories and these players and the tour, really like you're getting eyeballs to the tour for these players up and coming, like chasing this dream. Like that, I think this is probably no surprise to you, but like the appeal to your account is really these dreamers, these guys that are making these tremendous sacrifices financially, family, etc., to really chase this dream, which has no guarantee of it ever working out. And a lot of these folks, they would just be names on a page or a score on a scoreboard if it weren't for the great work that you've been doing over the years. And I think it's very short-sighted to think of a media rights kind of block on that when it's really growing. That's the true thing that's kind of growing the game, like growing interest in the game, growing interest in the tour. I mean, that had been pretty frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, thank you, but yes, I say this all the time. Jim is like, I hope that I think why my account has resonated with people is I think we can relate to dreamers who don't have a lot of money, who are chasing their dream against not like there's the mathematical chances of making it onto the PGA Tour. No one would ever do that if they were a reasonable person, right? It costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to get to the PGA Tour for most players, hundreds of thousands. And the odds of making it are maybe 1%, even for very good players. Norman Zhang, who's finally on the PGA Tour, was compared to Tiger Woods. It took him 6 years or 7 years to get to the PGA Tour. So, like, it just doesn't make sense. But I think a lot of us can relate to the human element of it. The like jealousy is not the right, but like understanding that these guys are throwing reality to the side and chasing their dream. Like we can all relate to that. We would all love to be. I'm in there now. Like we all want to be that person. So I think we can relate to that much more than we can relate to Chris Kirk making $10 million in Hawaii. Nothing against Chris Kirk. It's great for him. It's just I can't relate to that. I'll never be able
Mm-hmm.
to relate to that. I can relate to Mark Baldwin, my good friend and business partner who lives in his in-laws house at 40 years old and has a young kid, and they don't have any money because he believes he's good enough and he's made 3 cuts, the last 3 PGA Tour cuts. That's the carrot that keeps him out there. He's like, I'm good enough. So, yeah, I think it was very, very frustrating, my relationship with the PGA Tour. Uh, but what I've come to learn is they don't want to talk about the negative side of pro golf. And I just try to talk about the reality of pro golf. I don't want to talk about all negative, but negative part of is part of it, you know? I was talking to a player yesterday who was like, Ryan, I got to stay over for the Monday qualifier an extra day. Hawaii hotels are expensive. My credit card's maxed out. Can you help me out? Like, that is the reality of pro golf. I'm not asking people to feel sorry for that person. They've made the choice to be in that position. But that is part of the story. Like, so
Yeah.
what I've come to learn is the PGA Tour doesn't want the negative side of golf to be talked about.
I don't
And
even. It's funny because I
it's
don't
not
even see
negative.
that.
Yeah.
I don't even see it as a negative. I think it's part of the adversity, right? So when there's
Yes.
a
Right.
breakthrough, it's that you overcame all of this, which
Yes.
it's. And I wouldn't even say that the people that are in it would call it a negative.
Never.
It's just part of the process, right?
Yeah. I mean, again, like Mark never goes like, woe is me or whatever. Like, yeah, the same with the player that I talked to yesterday. He was like, my credit card's max. Like, he's not like, oh my God, my credit card's max. He's like, hey, my credit card's max. Like, it is what it is. Like, this is part of the deal. It's been maxed plenty of times before. And so, like, he's not asking for any sympathy outside of, hey, I could use some financial help, right? I mean, he gets to wake up and chase his dream every day. So, yeah, that's my frustration, Jim. I should have probably said it better. It's like it's not negative. It's just part of the process, right? It's like these guys just don't magically. I think as casual golf fans, and even going back to the camper, like when I met that guy in the public restroom at the campsite, I just kind of they just magically appear on your TV, and you don't think about how they got there. And no better story than Eric Cole. He's 13 years. He's playing on the minor league tour. For those listening, I'm telling you, miles removed from the PGA Tour. The minor league tour is a $150 entry fee, 1 day. Most of them $220 entry fee, 1 day tour in Florida. So that's all I want to tell is part of the entire process, not just what you see on TV.
Even somebody like, or maybe you know the details of this, but even someone who, like Scotty Scheffler, right? Like his path to the tour and path to number one on tour was hardly this linear exponential rise, right? I mean, he had to go through Monday qualifiers and some of the stuff, right, for a while.
I mean, I say all the time, one of my favorite like stats is not really a stat, but the Utah Monday qualifier for the Korn Ferry event, they play a very easy golf course. And most Korn Ferry sites have 2 sites, but this one only has 1. So they have 8 qualifying spots. At the time that this one was played, there was actually 12 qualifying spots. And Will Zalatoris and Scotty Scheffler both shot 65 and finished T18, missed qualifying by 2 strokes. And like at that Monday qualifier, no one would have, outside of super golf nerds who knew college golf, right? They would have been just one of 150 guys at that Monday qualifier. And especially after they missed, no one would have been like, oh, there's the future of pro golf. There's the number one best golfer in the world. And, whatever Will is at his peak, 6 or 7, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, that's Monday qualifiers, and that's the process. Is like, I think Scotty made 1 of 7 Monday qualifiers on the Korn Ferry Tour and missed the cut of the one event he got into. So it's like the fine line of making it and missing it is just way smaller than people think.
Yeah. So why don't we go there a little bit? Because I know you've been tracking this over time, and maybe it will give first of all, some perspective in terms of just how deep the talent pool is at this level. But like, you got to go low. You got to go really low to qualify, right? So in terms of like what score do you need to shoot, and like sort of what mindset do you need to have, and just like in your experience, like being at these things and just knowing the parties involved, like just how good do you have to be?
Yeah, I mean, I think people just have no understanding. It's hard too on a TV screen, and especially for people you don't know. I have a ton of experience caddying for Mark, so I use Mark as an example along the line. He's super long. If you met him, you would be like, how is this? I mean, he gets those comments all the time. Is like, how are you not on tour? A lot of these guys do, right? We're talking a quarter of a stroke or half a stroke or round difference between him and a player that's 75th on the PGA Tour money list. Like, we're not talking like these guys are shooting 2 or 3 strokes difference. Like Patrick Flavin could easily beat Max Homa. They would play, if they played a money game, they'd play straight up. No one's giving any strokes out. So the scores you need, I mean, on a Korn Ferry Tour Monday qualifier, you need 66 or better. They play a little bit easier courses. So, I mean, a great example is this week. It was only a 2-spot or a 4-spot Monday qualifier, but a guy, Clay Fiegler, who played at Pepperdine, shot bogey-free 64 and lost in a playoff. Didn't make a bogey in the playoff, and cost himself $1,500, $500 entry fee, travel roughly $1,000. He shot bogey-free 64, didn't make a single bogey in the playoff. What's he get for it? He gets a $1,500 bill. So 99.8% of people don't know anybody that can shoot 64 on a regular basis. And they can't do it regularly, but on an easy course, they can do it semi-regularly. And so it's a half a stroke. You're talking a half a stroke between 50th best player in the world and the good guys that are playing at Monday qualifiers.
Yeah, and I think the thing about a 64 or 65 is there's no guarantee that the best golfer in the world is going to shoot a 64 or 65 on any given day. And you need a lot of things to go right. So these guys are competing against guys that are just as good as them and just hoping that it all kind of clicks that day just to have a chance to get into an event and needing to make the cut to actually get a paycheck, right? Because that's a whole nother, like what percentage of people actually make the cut that that
Yeah,
Monday
about
qualifier?
28 per over the years I've tracked it, about 28% of make the cut. And the quote I always use is Mark's. He's like, once you Monday qualify, that's when the real expenses start, right? So like if you Monday qualify into a PGA Tour event, yes, you get a car for free, but if you want to pay for a PGA Tour caddy, that's another $2,000. You got to pay for a hotel for a week. Often in big cities, you're talking another $2,500 or 2,800, whatever you can find. You're talking through the Monday qualifier to teeing it up on Thursday, talking 6 grand, 7 grand, and you miss the cut. You don't get the $5,000 stipend. Obviously, before that, there was no stipend. So you're talking $6,000 to miss a cut. Uh, that's a tough pill to swallow for a lot of people. Um, so yeah, and that's what I love about it. That's the human element that I love is that, I mean, I was on the bag, lucky enough to be on the bag for Mark when he made 3 cuts. If you don't think we thought about stuff financially, you're just wrong. Like he's like, this is great. And it's not like, oh, I'm going to support my family. He's like, oh, I can get to more Monday qualifiers. I can enter events I want to enter. Like you just keep that money, keep going to get to the PGA Tour.
So I recall when we were caddying for Mark, and one of the, I think it was Pebble Beach, right? He was pretty much in contention in the last day. Can you talk about that experience? And also, like, do you think that hanging over his head was like a looming thing as you guys were coming down the stretch?
Yeah, 100%. I I think about it a lot. We talk about it a lot, so I can imagine how much Mark thinks about it. So yeah, we were T19 going into the final day, and top 10. You get into the next event. It's truly life changing. If Mark would have shot 68 that day on the final day, his life would have changed. That's all there is to it. Uh, and he shot 75. Um, and it was such a great look into just being a rookie as a caddy. I didn't know, like, I'd never been in that position. Mark hadn't been in that position as a player on the PGA Tour. Like, we got away from what Mark is very casual on the golf course. He doesn't want to grind except for over the thing. We talk about politics and stand-up comedians in between shots and then kind of lock in for the last 30 seconds. And we just took Sunday way too seriously. We laughed and joked for 3 days and enjoyed the hell out of the ride, and then got to Sunday and we're like, oh, we got to be serious. And like, the moment overcame both of us. Like, I didn't laugh. We didn't joke. We talked about golf the whole time. And that, like, we left Sunday, the greatest experience of our life at the greatest place on earth. Like Pebble Beach, we played with Fluff and Peter Jacobson, and Ben Rector was in our group, and Huey Lewis walked around with us, and our amateur partner was Steve Young. It was like the craziest week of our entire lives, and we walked away totally dejected. Like, and that's what pro golf is like, that moment is right there. Those 5 days, 6 days leading up to that were the greatest experiences of my golf life ever. And all I did was caddy. And Mark says the same thing. And then one round and it's gone. Like, we left that course thinking like you just can't help but think like, what
Yeah.
did I just do? Is it my last chance? Like, Mark's 40 years old. Like, was that his chance? And what would have happened had he shot 68? And obviously he shot the only bogey-free round on Spyglass for the entire week that week. He can hang on the PGA Tour. There is no doubt about it. And so, but looking back at it, it's a great insight into what this life is like. Given that opportunity again, we learn from it. Can you take advantage of it? And what would it do for his life? And that happens all the time on the PGA Tour. Every week, guys lose their card, or Monday qualifiers don't make the cut by one, which lets them skip pre-qualifiers. There's just a million things happening at a PGA Tour event that never make it to TV. And hopefully I bring a few of those to light.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. I mean, one of the things you brought to light recently is, I think Mark spent some time with Phil Mickelson, right? I mean, I think that you had a role in that.
Yeah. So Mark and Phil played a money match. There was a time in Mark's life that he was had backing and playing like higher stakes gambling matches. And Phil had just uh, got out of like the Ryder Cup was over, the one with Watson, and it was a complete debacle.
Hmm.
And so Phil wanted to get ready for the fall season after the Ryder Cup. He had taken like a month off. Through a connection, Mark's backer uh, agreed that he and Mark would take on Phil and another guy in a big money match. And so that was their only connection. It's a very cool story that Mark, in most Phil fashion ever, uh, Mark lost to Phil on the last hole. Mark was 3 up, standing on the 12th hole. Phil got up, was about to hit the ball, and said, "Am I 3 down?" And Mark said yes. And Phil said, "I promise I'm not gonna lose another hole." And then on the 18th hole, a par five, Phil hit a 7 iron to about a foot and a half for eagle to win the match and a large amount of money. And so, like the most Phil thing ever. But that was their only connection. So fast forward to this year, Mark got through first stage. Phil and I, crazily enough, have exchanged a few DMs. He follows me for some unknown reason, and like he's told me some things off the record, and I haven't used them. So maybe there's a trust factor there. I don't know. Uh, but I just sent him a message and said, "Hey, man, we had known that he had read the article. We had heard he had read the article that Mark had written, uh, and so I sent him an article and said, "Hey, man, would like to would you return the favor of having a match to get ready for? Would you just play a match with Mark before second stage?" And again, like zero thought that it would ever happen. First of all, I was like 3 weeks away from second stage. Like I'm sure Phil Mickelson has way better things to do, and I never thought in a million years. I thought he would go like, "Hey, man, thanks. I love the match, but I'm busy." Right?
Or even not respond at all, right?
Or even not
Yeah.
respond. 3 hours later, he's like, "Yep, no problem. Here's my cell phone number. Give it to Mark. We'll set it up." So a match, Mark says, like a match would have been amazing. He spent 3 days with Mark,
Wow.
and we didn't get through set. Mark didn't get through second stage, but 100% what Mark taught or what Phil taught Mark saved us multiple strokes. The guy's a short game wizard. And Mark's like, if I would have had this in my whole career, like he's crazy. He's a savant. Uh, and so actually Mark's going out to see Phil again in a couple weeks. Like the guy is like fully into Mark and going back to the little things that keep golfers going, and this isn't a little thing, but it is a little thing because it's not financial or anything. But Phil said to Mark, like, you have the game to compete on the PGA Tour. You can't quit. Right. And so obviously there's a financial aspect of being able to keep it going, but like, how can Mark walk away when one of the best golfers of all time
Yeah.
says that to you? Right? It's just like it's hard to say, like, okay, I've had enough. Like it just so uh off Mark goes again.
That's great. Obviously rooting for him. You mentioned Eric Cole. How about some of the other golfers that you really, really, really root for? Just like knowing their backstory, knowing the journey, knowing the sacrifice. Can we talk about that?
Yeah. I mean, there's just so many guys that I mean, Patrick Flavin is like so had Corn Ferry status, comes from a family with some money, but doesn't have a ton of money. Um, there's just so many guys. Jared Hack won the Western Amateur, beat Dustin Johnson and Matt Every, and turned pro at 19. Has been broke 100 million times. Had the driver yips, like went and caddied at Shadow Creek, and it's like making a comeback. Won first stage. Will have America's cat status. Obviously guys on tour, like people know Joel Damon as the funny guy on Twitter and the funny guy, but like his career path, like he finished. I say it all the time is like if there's a perfect picture of someone who makes the PGA Tour for a lot of players, it's Joel. Like finished, I think I'm going to make these numbers up, but it was something like finished 77th on Canadian Tour money list, finished 40th on Canadian Tour money list, finished first advanced to the Corn Ferry Tour, finished like 110th, finished 80th, finished 30th, finished 10th, got his PGA Tour card, barely kept his card, finally won on the PGA Tour. It's like that is the progression for 95% of players out on the PGA Tour. Is like, and I mean, to me, Jim, part of the story is guys that don't make it. I was just talking to Mark Anguiano, had a baby, doing teaching. I used to call Mark uh, the best player without status. Right, has won the Colorado Open, won millions, head Corn Ferry event, has had a baby and left. Like that's part of it. Norman Zhang, Brandon Brown is like used to dominate the Hooters tour, never made it. Like there's just so many guys and girls that are ultra talented, given a PGA Tour card or LPGA card, they could keep it, that don't make it. But that's what makes the guys who make it, the Eric Coles. There's a million Eric Coles out there that don't make it for years and never make it. But that's why Eric Cole's story is so cool to me, because I know the 50 guys that are like Eric Cole who are as talented as Eric Cole, but never get played well at the right time.
Do you think there's a differentiating factor between the Eric Coles and the Joel Damon's? Like, because I you mentioned Joel Damon's rise is fairly linear, but then I think there's probably folks that are at that level and then they lose it for whatever reason. You mentioned the driver yips, but like, this podcast exists a lot to help sort of junior golfers and parents kind of navigate that space. And I would say, if I asked my son this or some of his friends and some of the guys he's competed against, there's probably this perception that like, oh, I'm gonna play in college, I'm gonna be an All-American, I'm gonna be PGA Tour U, I'm gonna get my Corn Ferry status, and then I'm gonna, in a year or two or less, get to the PGA Tour. Where you have, like you said, there's just millions or tens of thousands of people that are just in this grind where it's up and down, and the margin is so thin, and it's not sexy, it's not glamorous, it's not lucrative, but these guys are still out there grinding. It's like, can you help just kind of give a further appreciation for just what it takes, like that grind, and maybe what separates, the guys that do give up or the guys that don't ultimately make it and the guys that ultimately break through?
Yeah, I really think, Jim, like, I think the game on the game side, it can vary player to player, right? Like Mark needs to improve his putting, but I think the mental aspect of golf can be so tough that's what I think parents and kids need to understand. That I taught a great interview that we're going to put out. Tommy Cole last night. Tommy played at the University of Illinois, All-American.
Yeah, that's where I went to school.
Not there's no such thing as a can't miss kid, but I mean he's a great kid, whatever. I'm talking to him in a hotel room by himself last night after he had the biggest moment in his pro career, only year long, but he this Monday qualified for a Corn Ferry event, right? And he's in a hotel room, and I said, "What's the hardest thing of being a pro golfer?" And he's like, "This is it." He's like, "I'm in a hotel room by myself. I've been surrounded by teammates who picked me up, friends who picked me up. My coach was there." He's like, "Now I'm in a hotel room by myself." So I think the mental aspect of pro golf I think we all see it. Kids, junior golfers, especially if you go to a big college program, you have so much support, right? And then all of a sudden you have some adversity in junior golf, in high school golf, in college golf. Teammates pick you up both on the course and off the course. And now all of a sudden you're all by yourself and you got to do those things. So my advice is to understand that a large portion of pro golf is going to be downs, and you got to make it mentally for the 5% or 10% of ups, right? And even the ups, like again, Tommy's biggest moment of his very short pro career was spent in, I don't know what he was in, a Holiday Inn, right? By himself. And he had to go get ready for a next event, which is tomorrow. And so I think the reality of pro golf as a whole encompassing thing can be alarming, especially for guys that are big. So, yeah, really focus on the mental side. That it is truly a grind.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So I wanted to shift gears a little bit. We've been talking a lot about, the Monday qualifiers. You also follow, the mini tour scene, and is where a lot of these guys sort of play when they're not doing the Monday qualifiers. But there's sort of an interesting aspect to that as well. You obviously have the folks chasing the dream. I mean, my son played in a mini tour event just earlier today, but then you there's also like a seedy side to it. I think you've uncovered quite a bit of I don't know, fraudulent behavior on the scene. I guess it's sort of taking advantage of folks that are just trying to find a place to play and willing to sign over a check, and enough people want to do that. I guess there's enough money to somebody to run with it, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, mini tour scams have happened as long as mini tours have been around, and that's been forever. There just hasn't been someone to report on it. So these aren't new stories. They're just finally being reported. But for some reason, scammers find their way to mini tour golf. I don't know why, but they eventually do. And it happens all the time. So these mini tour owners collect a lot of money, and then I think there's a portion of them who just don't understand the costs and overpromise, and then they realize that the money's going to disappear soon, so they disappear. But there's definitely a portion. The latest one, the Senior Players Tour, uh, this guy. It seems from all the stuff that I have reported that it was kind of. It seems like there was probably a plan to get out with some of the money, and players need a place to play. And so they tend to look beyond, Edward Lohr says a great thing, 4-time All American who sells insurance now, uh, is said, if it's too good to be true, it's too good to be true, right? And so, uh, but golfers need a place to play. And so they go, oh, there's a $30,000 first place prize. It's only a, $800 entry fee. I'm going to go. They don't think about the math. They don't think about, like, how is this guy going to pay us? They just are like, and they need a place to play. They need a check. Let's go. And so, yeah, there's a lot of stories about shady mini tours, and it's been a crazy side of what I covered. I mean, threats, and it's wild. It is a wild side of pro golf.
Oh, that's amazing. And I guess, on a lighter note, you also highlight, I would call it more the zanier side of the mini tour life, or even probably like pre-quals as well. Like you get all sorts of casting characters. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, so people ask, though, there's a pre-qualifier for the PGA Tour. Truly, anyone with a 2 can qualify for a PGA Tour event, but they have a pre-qualifier for exactly this reason. Uh, People either, yeah, I mean, there's either people who are delusional or people who want to go just to say they're doing it. A lot of it is a guy shoots a 75 once at his home course and he thinks he can play in the PGA Tour. So he signs up for a pre-qualifier. Never played tournament conditions in his life. Definitely never played the tips. And shoots 110. But we've had YouTube people. I had a guy who was legitimately a cowboy. I call him the cowboy qualifier. He showed up in a full cowboy hat and had a knife, and I mean, just wild stuff. Qualifiers, I mean, they're the wild, wild west of pro golf for sure.
I wanted to, because the sections, they will gladly take their $250 or $275, right? So with the changing landscape of the tour, like I think about, I guess, Scottsdale, right? I mean, they had multiple qualifiers, but that's turning into an elevated event, right, this year. So that's like a big chunk
so
of.
it wasn't last year, but definitely the PGA sections in some of these towns are going to be affected. So Waste Management is not an elevated event this year. It was last year. But, I've talked to the Southwest PGA section. The director's become a friend of mine. And, that was his concern when they became an elevated event. If they stayed an elevated event, that makes up a huge, huge portion of their budget. They have 8 pre-qualifiers for the Waste Management Open, and that brings in tens of thousands of dollars for them. And so PGA sections, I foresee, if this continues to go the way that I think it's going, or it seems to be going, is that Monday qualifiers might not be as prominent. I think there's a fight between the PGA Tour of America and the PGA Tour at some point, because Monday qualifiers are an important moneymaker. So, yeah, it's every day is different, as you guys know, in the pro golf game over the last 18 months. So, a fight over Monday qualifiers is far down the list, but I think eventually there'll be a fight over Monday qualifiers.
That's interesting. And I guess I wanted to maybe ask you this question that I just thought of. Like, you're close enough to this scene. If you were sort of the czar of Monday qualifiers and the tour gave you that job, what would be the first couple of things that you would change to maybe improve on them?
Yeah, I mean, on the Corn Ferry side, I think it's the easiest changes. I think there needs to be a separate qualifier for members only. Anybody can sign up for the Corn Ferry Monday, Joe down the street, whatever, 2.0 handicap. It squeezes a lot of members out. So guys who should have an advantage because they've earned the right to be a member are competing against guys who aren't members. I mean, obviously, my biggest thing that I think should happen is that there should be a small purse for the 4 players that get through. No one's asking, I'm definitely not asking for players to make any money. If they could cover part of their expenses. So for those listening, $500 for non-members to enter a Monday qualifier. So there's tens of thousands of dollars in entry fees between the pre-qualifiers and Monday qualifier. I think if the 4 qualifiers could make $2,500, that would be the most immediate and important change in my opinion. If you could give guys $2,500, or the easiest one would be just make them eligible for the $5,000 stipend that everybody gets on the PGA Tour except for Monday qualifiers and sponsor exemptions, who happen to be the guys who need it the most.
Yeah. That stipend seems like a no-brainer, and like you said, the money's there. It's not like it's coming out of anybody's pocket necessarily. So obviously the Corn Ferries, 25 guys graduated to the PGA Tour. They brought back the Q School, which was great to see, and really compelling stuff. And 5 guys got their tour cards from that. So of these 30 guys, you followed their journey up and through the ranks. Like, for listeners who may be new to these new tour entrants, like guys that we should be rooting for because just better understanding of their backstory.
Yeah. Number 1 is Hayden Springer. Hayden finished 5th at Q School and got his PGA Tour card. I'm not sure there's better story is not the right word, because it unfortunately includes a lot of sadness, but Sage and they had a daughter, Emma, and Hayden had a daughter named Sage who was born with trisomy 18, and she passed away a month and a half ago at the age of 3. It's just an amazing family. I've been very close. I was lucky enough to tell their story very early on, and Sage's story. And Sage had passed away last month, and Hayden went on to get his card a month later. Hadn't really played much golf, obviously because of the passing of his daughter, and he's just one of the best people I've met in golf. And it's a great family. The parents, in-laws, everybody who I was lucky enough to talk and tell their story. He's just a really good dude, and I hope he kills it on the PGA Tour, because it's well deserved. Blaine Hale Jr. got through Q School, never played a PGA Tour sanctioned event. That's what Q School is all about. Tom Whitney, Air Force graduate. His wife still serves in the Air Force. They have 4 kids. Tom's brother, who was his best friend, passed away from suicide about 2.5, 3 years ago. And so there's just a lot of great stories. That's all there is to it. Like, we should be rooting for these guys. We should know their backstory. And even if they're 10th or 15th or 20th or making the cut, we should tell their story.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And yeah, they need guys in their corner. And I think you highlighting the stories and these good guys in the tour, that have overcome adversity. They're just like good dudes, right? You want to see them,
Yeah.
continue to grow and do well and chase their dreams and achieve their dreams. It's just
Yeah.
that's what this game is at the end of the day.
100%. Yeah, I mean, Tom Whitney, again, take out his story, but he was on the Corn Ferry Tour, lost it, considered quitting, went back to the Latin American Tour, got his Corn Ferry card back, came again. Like, this is after 6 years or 4 years of service in the Air Force and having multiple kids and how to figure out how to make it work financially. And so, again, everybody looks at like, oh, he gets $500,000 check. That $500,000 check for Tom, who's been a pro for 10 years, has not made him even. I promise you that. Like, he's had sponsors, so it's not like he has $500,000 in debt. But I'm just saying, in total, the amount of money he's spent on his career, that $500,000 is not a break even. It costs $50,000 plus to play a mini tour schedule, and you aren't making it back.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of these relationships that you formed. I really think that the strength of your account and why it's such a compelling follow is, I think, because of this relationships. And I think it's a credit to you, in terms of, the sources and the relationships you've been able to form over time, and just the way that you tweet and you message and you write, like it all, like the heart of it just shines through. Like, I guess I wanted to understand, like, what does a typical Monday look like for you in terms of not only just like tracking the tournament very, very closely, but just like getting the inside intel and the course conditions and like kind of what's happening behind the scenes, both from the section folks, but also the players.
Yeah, I mean, again, Jim, I didn't know what I was doing, but now that I've looked back, kind of earning the players' trust has been such a huge aspect of it. Now, obviously, I consciously make sure that I'm earning their trust now, but I didn't do it consciously back then. Like, they would tell me something and say, "Don't use my name," and I would be like, "Okay," but I didn't think about why I wasn't using their name or what that would do for me, plus or like to my advantage or disadvantage down the road if I did use their name. But now I wrote about it in my newsletter today, is like, hey, here's when I use players' names or when I require them. If they're going to accuse a player of cheating, they have to use their name. But other times, I just say, yeah, of course I won't use your name, and no problem. So earning a player's trust is a big thing. So things like today, I can talk about court conditions. I can shoot a player a message before their round or after their round yesterday and ask about what's happening on the course, how they felt about their closing bogey. And, Patrick Flavin is a great example. Like, Patrick bogeyed 2 out of the last 3 holes. It ended up costing him to get into a playoff, and then he lost in the playoff today. So, like, I know enough. I didn't know back then, but like, I've earned a player's trust to be able to text him in that moment now, right? Is like, hey, Patrick, saw you bogey. What happened? He knows that I'll handle it well, not tweet about like what an idiot or anything
Yeah.
like that. I've earned the player's trust. So the big thing is, like, I know the course, get a hold of the section, talk to as many players, caddies as I can. And again, I'm lucky enough to be able to know a bunch of players and know a bunch of caddies that I just have to want to be as prepared as possible. Um, and then, yeah, getting a hold of, like, there's players I come across, especially on the Corn Ferry side, that I don't know. But again, a lot of the hard work that I didn't know I was putting in, like, of learning players, I often have a connection to that player that I don't know their story, or get a hold of them and talk to it. So a typical Monday is just Sunday, talk to players after their practice round, uh, talk to as many caddies. I have a relationship with most of the sections, so they'll tell me about the course or anything like that. Then Monday is the day. It just changes each Monday. But just know their story and tell interesting things. But again, the thing that I don't ever want to get away from is like in the Monday in the middle of the of the event, I just tweet what I think is interesting. Like I tweeted out a photo of a guy just standing in the pouring rain yesterday, and he's like, "Oh, he said something funny or stupid, like, oh, I think it's going to start raining soon, or something like that." Like that's just funny to me. I would send it to my friends. I just
Yeah,
happened to send it to 158,000 people now, right? Like it's funny to me. I think it's hilarious that not hilarious, but I think it's so ironic that a guy spent $3,000 or $4,000 and here he is holding his phone, right? Like in the middle of a complete rainstorm, like to chase his dream. Like that's crazy and hilarious. And so I don't ever want to get too far away from just continuously tweeting what I find interesting. Like I'm a golf nerd. I think it's hilarious that guys shoot 100 at pre-qualifiers. I think it's funny that people stand in the rain. I think there's great stories. I think there's sad stories. I think there's good and bad. So I just want to continue to do that.
I gotta say, I mean, you mentioned that you don't have a journalism background or education. I think that everything you said is just sort of like the journalism gold standard. I mean, I think that you really have a heart for like protecting those sources, collecting the right information, like validating information before you post it. Like you really go about it the right way. Where you see less and less in that these days, unfortunately.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. And I take those. I don't know if it's because I don't have a journalism background, but we haven't talked about it. But I've written some stories about players who are cheating, and like I understand now what those stories are going like the effect that is going to have on that person's life. And so I report the hell out of those stories because the last thing I want to make sure A, it's happening. B, like I want to talk to that person if they want to talk. Like, and I want to do that with every story. Like, this is going to affect people's lives in a good way. 95% of my stories are positive, but the 5% that's going to affect their lives in a negative way. And I don't know if it's because I don't have a journalism degree. Like, if you're a political journalist, you're going to write some sort of negative story and it's going to have effect on your life every day. So I don't ever want it to become a good or bad story. I don't ever want it to become like, oh, this is just another story. Like cheating allegations, negative or positive. I just want to do my best to get the story right and understand that it's going to have an effect on people's lives. Like, again, I didn't think about this now, but I know it now. Like, I have a powerful platform. My words mean something to a lot of people, and that's not just a willy-nilly responsibility. Like that is a very serious responsibility. Like I can affect people's lives. Like I can put out a wrong tweet. There's this whole thing going on with Philadelphia Flyers right now. Like whether that story is true or not, only the journalist knows, but like it's affecting people's lives. And so I really want to make sure I always do that. I'm going to make mistakes. I've made mistakes before, but A, learn from them, and B, understand that I have a power that needs responsibility. It's all there is to it.
Yeah. I think one of the positives that I've seen come out of your account, from time to time is like you've been able to mobilize your followers and these fellow golf nerds to help out a pro golfer in need, or like help out a high school team that needs clubs or shirts or equipment, or like connecting the dots. Like I even saw like Sahith Thigala, like did he reach out to you in terms of like help, like mobilizing some gear that he had? But like, and I think more recently you've actually started a formal foundation. So we talk about just like, just the experience of seeing, the goodness in golfers. I think golf is just the greatest game in the world, the greatest game that man ever invented. And I think folks that have that bug, they just want to spread that gospel to everybody they know, and they're happy to help out like any golfer. Like if you're a golfer, you're my friend. Like that's sort of my life motto. But can you talk about like that experience and when it first started happening and how the momentum started from there?
Yeah. a shout out to my wife, who is a wonderful person, has really changed my life. And as my account grew, even when I didn't have money, it's like, you need to do something good with this platform that you've built. So high school teams would reach out to me and say, "Hey, we don't have range balls, or we don't have a place to practice," and I would put up a GoFundMe, and my followers are amazing people. I always say it often is I'm just the mediator and lucky enough to have a platform. People take care of it. They're the power. And so the 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 GoFundMe would be exceeding its goal in, a day. And I'd be able to go take these high schools a check for four, five, $6,000. And so a follower of mine named Chris Gallagher, who is an amazing human, um, his parents left him some money and he wants to do good with it. And he called me up and said, "Hey, let's start a foundation. I'm going to write you a check for $100,000."
Oh,
And so we've done that, and we've helped high school teams, help kids. And I say this all the time. I very cool the experiences that I've had in my life personally from this account, but to help people expose them to a game that I love is amazingly rewarding. It's super selfish. I say that all the time. It's like, oh, it's so great. It's great that you help kids. Yeah, it is. It's super selfish. It gives me such the greatest feelings. We've helped a kid that I've tweeted about a lot. His name is Elijah. Doesn't come from money, and his dad is unable to work because of COVID. His mom, has a regular job. He had 9 clubs, and they were 15 years old, and we gave him a complete everything: bag, shoes, golf, got fitted for everything down to a putter. It was $5,000. And he just got a college scholarship. And
that's awesome.
and like I don't even know what to say. It's I get more joy out of it than he does, right? It's what I've done. I didn't do anything. I just gave someone, and we don't care what people shoot. Elijah is obviously an exception, but you could learn so many life skills from this game. If a kid, we've helped inner city schools, we've helped rural schools. If one of those kids can meet somebody on the golf course that will give them a job or give them a life skill that will make them sell more, if they become a salesman, a lot of sales happen on golf courses. We can give them the skills to better their life in any way, then we've accomplished anything. That's what we want. And so, um, yeah, the foundation is a super rewarding and lucky and crazy, again, the craziest thing. And I will tell this story. He hates that I use his name, but uh, and he gets a ton of a negative press. But Aaron Rodgers has been immensely helpful. He asked me to send him uh, anything that comes up with this. I just put up one for a guy who's a pro golfer whose dad has cancer, and his mom stays home to take care of him. He had his club stolen, and Aaron gave him $5,000. It's just been the craziest ride. People are amazingly nice, and golf is a great life skill, and I want to expose it to as many people as I can. I have a platform to do it, and people who are willing to help that. So, uh, again, I have a fun 90% of my life. 10% of my life, I need to use my platform for good.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So, you said you basically have started this as a business. It's still, I think, probably in its infancy in terms of its potential and growth. First of all, where can folks find out more as opposed to just following, but maybe they want to subscribe or get more deeper dive? And then also, what are your plans for 2024 and beyond?
Yeah. Go to mondayq.com and you can subscribe. Another insight into my life is in journalism is it's been how hard it is to be a true independent journalist, right? The PGA Tour can crush you tomorrow, and you try to find sponsors and then realize oh, you're going to write a negative story about one of their sponsors. It's just a very complicated process. So we try to remain as independent as possible. So subscribers help. It's $50 a year. The more, the merrier. And yeah, 2024 is going to be just more of what we're doing now, but just more in depth. Um, more videos, more behind the scenes, more podcasts. Um, we're working on telling some young guys stories from Callaway and just more, but what we're doing just more in depth.
Did I see somewhere that you were thinking about reinstating this father-son mini tour caddy concept?
Yeah. So actually in Serious Works in it. Yeah. So what it's an experience that I don't think, obviously, you get it with your son. Uh, a lot of people do. So I'm working with the Epson Tour and the All Pro Tour to have a week where I would invite parent, child, daughter, mother, father, son, whatever combination of that it is. And we'll arrange everything and we'll arrange players who want to do it. And the father, son, or parent, child can caddy for a pro golfer in a pro event in the same group at least the first 2 days. So we hope
Oh
to make it
man,
a reality this year because
sign me up.
again, yeah,
I'm in.
because
I'm in. I'm saying it right here. I'm in.
perfect, done, first one. So I mean, again, no one. I just didn't. I wish I would have kept a journal. Like no one gets that experience, right? And these, I will make sure that the players that we connect them with have a chance or are good players, and so that people can see how good they are. And one of those players in your group or in the event,
Yeah.
or one of them you will meet will make it. That's what's happened to me, right? Like, uh, I'm like Ryan Yip played on the Corn Ferry Tour, and you're going to go like, "Holy cow! I caddied for that person." Uh, and so, yeah, I'm working with the Epson Tour and the All Pro Tour to make it happen this year. It's one of my most exciting projects because it's just I know as a golf nerd how important those trips were to me, and I can't imagine if I did it at 15 or 16 years old. Like, and then my dad and I never arranged where we were caddying in the same group. So we would get together after the round and just tell stories to each other, like, oh, he
Yeah.
did this or did that. Like my dad caddied with Graham Dillette or in a group with Graham Dillette. And like we just go, but to have our goal is to have like a dinner with the parent and children and maybe some players show up and like we just all of them can share stories of like, oh my god, this shot or this reaction. And again, they can be good and bad. I mean, my dad had dementia and passed away in February, but for some reason he always remembered that Manuel Villegas, who's Camilo's brother, who played professionally for a long time, swore all the time, like said the F word, like just like unbelievable amount of swear words. And I'm a swearer, so like he would just swear all the time. But those are hilarious stories, is great, right? Like, I mean, I remember a guy crying off the end of 18, like he had missed 4 cuts in a row. It's just like those are great experiences. That's pro golf. That happens all the time. And so to have that would be, I hope we can, it is one of my biggest things that I want to make sure happens. It's
All
a
right.
very cool
Well,
experience.
anything I can do to help, but yeah, definitely put me in for spot number one.
Awesome.
I'll talk to Luke,
Love
but yeah, I'm committing him as well as long as the timing works out. No, that's awesome. And look, Ryan, I mean, I knew this already, just following your stuff and listening to your podcast, but just talking to you face to face through this hour or so, your heart for the game just absolutely shines through. And really, this is the game, the game at its essence. I mean, we all want to get better at the game. We're all chasing, a couple strokes improvement, and these guys are right on the cusp. Like you said, that quarter of a stroke or half stroke or just 4 magical days or 3 magical weeks away from achieving their dreams, and they're all making these tremendous sacrifices to be able to just to even have a chance. And I think we are all better off as golf nerds and golf fans because of the work that you're doing and the great work that you're doing and highlighting these stories. And like I said, they give us guys to root for, good dudes that are really just chasing it. And like you said, we see ourselves in their journey. And I just really thank you for the time you spent with us. And I really look forward to seeing your account grow and more people hearing these stories. And so folks, subscribe, support Ryan and all the work he's doing. And I look forward to caddying with you or seeing you out in mini tour event sometime later this year.
Yeah. Thanks, Jim, for having me on. Yeah, it's been the craziest of rides, and I hope I say it all the time on Twitter. If I don't, the times that like seeing myself on Golf Channel or having people ask me on their podcast as a guest, if I stop finding that cool, I need to, give it up, because like to sit here and talk with golf nerds like that's what I would do anyway. Like it's what I did in my life prior to Monday Q being a thing. It's like all my friends were golfers and we sat around and talked about golf nerd stuff. And now I get to do it as a job. So thank you. Yeah, I'm very, very lucky, and I appreciate these conversations, and I look forward to caddying.
Andrew Lewis, welcome back to the Angle of Attack.
Jim, good to see you.
This is part 3 of our series around tournament prep. Back in episode 7, we talked about pre-tournament prep, those days and weeks leading up to the tournament. And then last episode, we talked about practice rounds, and which are generally usually like the day before, and some of the best practices around that. So this episode, we're going to talk about very kind of laser focused. This is within the tournament and just being prepared, let's say like night before, morning of, and then post round. What are some of the differentiating factors? Because I think you're looking for that advantage amongst the field. Like where can you gain an advantage in these 3 areas around just being better prepared and better, more laser focused than the rest of the field?
Yeah, so let's start with the night before the event. This is probably your last opportunity to really prepare for tomorrow's round. And so what does that mean? In my world, that's looking over the pin sheets or the whole location sheets. Most of the time, those are going to be emailed out or listed on the website, and really going through, what your strategy is going to be. Also looking at the weather conditions for tomorrow, looking at the temperature, really just trying to almost visualize or anticipate like the shots you're going to be hitting. I physically would dot my pen, so I'll literally get a pencil and write on the whole location sheet or on the yardage book where the whole location is going to be, just so I can start to kind of understand where that is. It's nice to have the whole location sheet in your back pocket with your yardage book, but I think having it dotted makes being able to, if you are going to use the greens data, it makes it that much faster. Other than that, for a night before, I really think you need to think about, what you're eating the night before and like the amount of sleep you're going to have, and really almost like working your way back. So for example, if you have an 8 a.m. tee time, well, then I'm going to have to get up, or I want to be at the golf course at 6:45. That means I need to be up by 6 o'clock or 5:45, and I need 9 hours of sleep. So I'm having to go to bed at 8:45. And so really like planning your night based on like what your tee time is the night before, so that you have adequate amount of sleep, adequate amount of food, adequate amount of water, to where you're showing up feeling like you're ready to go play golf. Versus I've had some kids playing Fortnite till like, 1 o'clock in the morning for a 6 o'clock wake up. They weren't exactly prepared, and they may or may not have had the worst round of their year, so we can avoid those things by just being smart. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I could tell you, I mean, we've been traveling quite a bit for tournaments, and I wasn't there, but there's one example where my wife and my son, they saw one of their first round playing partners the morning before the final round. And he has said, I remember this. He said he had been up watching movies till like 3 in the morning, and he shot 81 or, and when you think about like what's at stake for these tournaments, we talked about a few episodes. But between the difference between a high finish and a low finish, there's a lot at stake, and you're going a long way. Sometimes you're spending quite a bit of money, and you want to optimize for this performance. And really, one stroke matters, and definitely being ill prepared or unrested could be the difference between 5 or 6 or even more strokes, and the difference between being in the middle of the pack or towards the bottom of the field. Yeah, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. The reason that I like to do that stuff the night before versus like the morning of, I guess it'd be okay if it was like an afternoon tee time, you could do some of that in the morning, is, your morning routine, for most golfers is like an hour, 15 hour and 30 minutes. Like you don't have a ton of extra time. It takes 15 or 20 minutes to kind of go through your book, dot the pins, think about your strategy. So I would say if you can space some of that out, that's probably going to keep you a little bit fresher mentally. I mean, think of your brain as like a battery, and the more things you're focusing on throughout the day. We're talking, I mean, a round of golf from the time you wake up to the time you finish, you're talking like 7 or 8 hours. And it's very, very easy to feel like emotionally and physically drained. So doing some of that the night before should make you feel a little bit more fresh versus like waking up earlier to try to do some of that. I just think that would be like beneficial for most players.
Yeah. And then in my experience, it always takes a little bit longer to get out the door, to get to the course. You know, you underestimate the time it's going to take to get out to the driving range and that sort of thing. And I think the feeling of being rushed in the morning, the day of, and
terrible.
And like that drains your battery faster, and it puts you in a state of mind where you're just not ready to play your best golf from my perspective.
Yeah. So, so let's assume you do all that, show up to the golf course, you're ready to go. I do think it's good to have like almost like a checklist of things that you should be having. We just had an event this last week, and we forgot a couple things. We weren't staying in our house, but it's so easy to forget things that you might need for the event. But let's assume that you have everything. A player's routine is very, very unique. And I'm not going to speak necessarily to like a specific routine. I would say, though, that what I see with a lot of kids in their pre-round is that they just don't touch on enough stuff. For example, they don't hit bunker shots. They don't hit enough shots around the greens. They do very little speed control. And they spend a majority of their time hitting golf balls, like too many golf balls. And so I would say that if you're going to spend a majority of your time, you should be getting used to the conditions more than like making sure that I'm hitting it good. If you're having to make sure that you're hitting it really, really good in your warm up, then that's kind of like that cramming for the test analogy that I've used in previous episodes, to where you're just hoping that it's going to be good enough versus like, hey, I just need to kind of get warmed up for the day. I really don't know like how fast the greens are. I really don't know how that first landing spot chipping is going to react. I don't know what the bunkers are like. And just because you played yesterday doesn't mean you know what the bunkers are like. If it's early in the morning, they're probably wet and they're going to react differently. And so, getting used to conditions would be more important than like just spending 45 minutes hitting. I have a very specific routine that I like to do, and I'd be happy to discuss if that would be helpful. But come up with yours and make sure it has a lot of touch points.
Yeah, let's talk about like what would your normal prep be?
Yeah, so my first one would be go straight to the green and start doing speed control. When I think about, when I struggle on the greens, it's usually from like 25 to 30 feet. So I'll start, 30, 45, 50 feet and just take 2 or 3 balls and start hitting very, very different types of putts, uphill, downhill, side hill. And the reason I like to have 3 balls is like the first ball is very, very reactionary to like what I'm feeling, and I just hit that putt. And then those next 2 balls are making adjustments based on what I'm seeing. And hopefully I'm starting to see a pattern of like, oh, I'm hitting these way harder or way shorter. I use the line when I putt, but even when I'm doing like this basic warm up with speed control, I'm just getting used to the speed. I'm not necessarily doing anything specific. From there, I take those same 3 balls and I start doing short game stuff. I do lots of chipping from the fairway, from the rough, and from the bunker. I find that for 2 reasons. One is it kind of helps me get loose. I don't have like a very specific like stretching routine like I know a lot of players do. I kind of get more loose just by like hitting little short game shots. The thing there is getting used to not necessarily the grass I'm chipping on or the rough I'm chipping out of. Down here, the grass isn't that different. It's more how is the green reacting? Is it spinning? Is it skidding? Are they firm? Are they slow? And then going through the shots I anticipate I'm going to be hitting. So low draws, mid cuts, flop shots, shots from the rough, different types of bunker shots. That's probably taken me about half an hour to do those 2 things. And then from there is when I'll go hit. And I'm kind of weird. I only hit my like even numbered clubs. And that'll probably take me about 15 or 20 minutes. And then the last thing I do is I go back and I start doing my routine of putting, which is for me is I'm dialing in my aim point reads. And I'm doing a lot of putts from like 4 to 15 feet moving around the green with 1 ball full routine. And the last thing I do is I hit a 4-footer because I want to see a putt go in before I go to the first tee. So that all in all takes me about an hour to hour and 15 minutes. And I've been doing that for the last 15 years or so. And interestingly, I saw something on like Golf Digest or PGA Tour. That's pretty much exactly what Tiger Woods does as far as his routine. And maybe that's why I did it originally, or maybe it was just coincidence, but it helps me make sure that I feel super prepared for like the day.
That's interesting. I was going to ask, honestly, before you mentioned it, whether it's putting green first or driving range first or vice versa, or if it matters, if you had a preference for one or the other.
I mean, I don't like hitting first because I feel like I have like 30 to 45 minutes after I hit to when my tee time is. And I just feel like I kind of like lose my feels a little bit. In my warm up, I probably am hitting my last tee shot with like 20 minutes before my tee time, because that leaves me like 10 minutes to kind of go through my putting. If I were to add any time to my routine, let's say I got there like an hour and a half earlier, I probably would do more like makeable putts in my warm up. Like that, it stretched that out to probably like 15 minutes of just seeing putts go in.
That's interesting. Now, one last thing on pre-round. What about like specific shot, like visualizing specific shots, either the first tee or like the par threes, like knowing exactly what you're going to need? Would you practice that specifically on the driving range?
It depends on the course or how uncomfortable certain shots made me. You know, you'll hear a lot of guys say that they like their last shot they hit on the range is like the shot they're going to go hit on the first tee. I think there's a lot of value to that. I would usually hit the shots that I'm anticipating hitting off the tee, like a tee down, like low cut versus like a high draw. I definitely would be going through those, not necessarily thinking specifically about a hole, but just more like I know I'm going to be hitting those 2 or 3 shots because I kind of hit those shots every round. I would be going back to something we talked about last time. If there's like specific yardage buckets that are very, very important, I probably would be spending a little bit more time on those yardage buckets, more than just hitting like 6 balls with my pitching wedge and 6 balls with my 8-iron. Maybe I'll spend more time on my 6-iron because I know I'm going to have a bunch of those, but not necessarily like specific to like a shot shape. Now, with that said, if I knew it was going to be very, very windy, then I'm definitely doing a lot more like low punch draws, low punch fades, just getting used to something that's abnormal because you're going to have to be flighting the ball in conditions like that. Or if the ground's really, really wet, making sure that I'm moving my low point forward, doing some things just to make sure I'm not going to hit any shots like fat or hit the ground early. But no, I wouldn't say that my pre-round routine, it's more of a routine. It's not necessarily like specific to the course.
Okay.
As much.
Okay. One last thing before we wrap up, just around like post round, just real quickly, like anything in terms of digesting what just happened and that's going to help you in the later rounds.
Yeah, I think the reflection piece, I'd see the reflection piece in 2 areas. One, you have your like immediately after your round, like, are you going to do any post round practice based on how you just played? And that would be really like skill specific. Like I saw my speed control today was terrible, or I noticed I kept having like a certain type of shot show up, like a high right, and I need to go solve that. I think it's important to go solve those things because, again, if you're just hoping it's going to be better tomorrow, the likelihood of that going away is very, very low. And so trying to find a solution would be good. Most likely, if you really were paying attention, heading into the event, you probably were seeing that same shot. You just may have been ignoring it. So it's probably a very common solution. So it shouldn't like be that you need, hours on the driving range. I remember, when Bryson won the US Open, right? He's the last one on the range and he's trying to hit this like certain drive. I mean, he's winning the US Open, but he's still like on the driving range working on a certain type of shot because it just wasn't going exactly how he wanted. So, I think all the prep in the world, you're still probably going to need a little post-round practice. Now, specific to like your reflection, I do think it's very, very important to be doing your statistics, even if you don't want to, or even if you're tired, like making sure that that's fresh and put in. Just because over time, you're going to forget a lot of detail. Hopefully you're writing all that stuff down, but even when you enter your stats, there's probably some stuff that you're just having to remember. It's hard to write everything down on your scorecard. And then, you're kind of starting the cycle over again, right? Like you're doing your reflection and then I'm dotting my pens again for day 2. And so now you're kind of circling back into like my prep for the next day. So that statistics piece kind of like wraps up day 1. And now I can start focusing on day 2.
Yeah, that's interesting. And get Chipotle.
And get Chipotle. Yes. You know, the last thing I'll say about this is like everyone is a little bit different. Like how I have my routine, you know, not everyone does things the way I do. Again, I think golf is very much about conviction. Like you just have to develop a lot of conviction around what you do. And if you believe in it and it's working for you, that's great. If it's not, then like be open to changing those things. The reason that I have a lot of conviction is it's really, really worked for me in my playing career. And so like, yeah, it'd be really hard to get someone to change like how I do things, like heading into events or like at the event. And if you're not in that boat, that's fine. Like be open to maybe some of the stuff that I'm telling you. Maybe that'll be helpful.
Yeah, I think it's find your path, but be convicted to that path. And yeah, I just think like the conviction and the confidence that is a result of the conviction can only lead to improved play, lower scores, and better tournament finishes. And that's what we're all striving for, right?
Yeah.
At the end of the day.
Yeah, like you've asked me, about, Luke has a TrackMan, right? So should Luke use TrackMan in his warm up? It's like, oh, you know what? There are players that do that. There are other players that don't. Like that's him trying to figure out like, is this a helpful thing for me to do in my warm up, or is that something that I should do post round? Like that's something that he's kind of like figuring out right now. Like that's kind of what I mean about like the conviction of like what makes you feel most ready, and that's fine. Like you don't have to have that all figured out right now, but just be processing that, just like you're reflecting on your stats, reflect on like all this other stuff too.
Yeah, that's great. So if folks have any questions for Andrew on this topic or just any of the tournament prep topics that we talked about, I would love to like get together and just figure out like sharing more content around this topic as over these next few weeks as we post these episodes and get some discussion around it. I think it'll be really helpful for the junior golfers. But your Instagram is at Andrew Lewis Golf, or you can reach out to me at Driven Golf Analytics, and we're happy to help.
Yes, sir.
Thanks a lot, Andrew. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely. See you soon.
Yeah. The Driven Golf Podcast is produced by Joseph K. If you like this episode, like it, subscribe, pass it on to a friend who might be interested. It really helps us out a lot. We'll be back in a couple weeks with the next episode. Until then, remember, in this great game, the journey is the gift. Enjoy the journey.